So it's an honor and a privilege to introduce Bill tonight, and we've already made plans for the men's retreat. He's going to bring a very special guy there, and I'm already excited about that. So come on up here, Bill.
Yeah, I did. Yeah. Well, the smart water's not working, so. Hey, y'all, my name is Bill, and I'm an alcoholic. My sobriety date is July 1st, 2008. My home group is the ABC group, and we're a men's meeting, and we meet on Tuesdays and Thursdays at Shady Grove Presbyterian Church in Memphis, Tennessee, 5530 Shady Grove Road. We have been known to open that meeting in the event of a woman showing up. It happened one time. The topic, randomly enough, was page 69. And she walked in after the chairperson had already started reading into a men's meeting and walked to the front of the thing and sat right down. And we have a group conscience, that if something like that happens, that we take a vote and we can open the meeting up. And we certainly did that because it may or may not be listed as a men's meeting on our webpage, on the intergroup website or whatever. So it happens, and very infrequently, but it does happen. Interesting. But so we also have, and this is not affiliated with that, but we have me and some friends, we started a small book study called A Way Out. That's what we call it. And it's formatted in a syllabus, and we have it where we study the literature before you come to the meeting. It's a book study that you don't read in. It's a book study that you're expected to come in prepared to share on that week's section of the book, so that we don't waste a lot of time with let me read this page and stop in the middle of it. And because it was important to us to try to get those ideas kind of sectioned out, as we go through. We read from the preface all the way to page 103. And it's our first pass through, and we found some kinks and probably crammed some too much stuff into spots, but we're going to work that through and try to run it again after the first of the year. That's on Wednesday nights at the same church, just in a different room. And it starts at 6:30. So if you're ever in Memphis and you're there Tuesday, Wednesday, or Thursday, come see us. We'd love to see you. And the book study's co-ed too, so it's really open. It's not listed. It's not a meeting. It's not a group. It's not anything official. What our hope is that we would teach people how to use this book to transmit this message. So if you're in another fellowship that uses our literature, we would hope that maybe you would come through and listen to us and talk to us about how and learn how to take this message back to that fellowship and use this book so that you can deliver the life-saving message of Alcoholics Anonymous. I do have a little bit of housekeeping. I don't know what story I'm going to tell first. I think I'm going to tell the Morris story first, since he didn't remember me, but I remembered him. But it's a good memory, Morris. So he's talking about, I'm going to start my smart water early. I got a big one, too, just in case. Taper says I got 79 minutes and 59 seconds, so hopefully that looks like enough. I won't keep you that long. I don't have anything to say that would take that long. I should say I just said it all right. I said I'm an alcoholic. That's it, right? I'm done. I mean, what else do I need to say? I think it's funny when we read the blue card, and it's like, if you have a problem, it's like if you have a problem with alcohol, man, if you're in an AA meeting, you got a problem. Nobody hit a scratcher and came to the AA meeting. Nobody was like, woo, it's like, no, man. Nobody had hope when we got here. Nobody was like, man, it's a good day. Let's go to AA, So we go to this, so we started going. Dirk, rest in peace. Dirk got us, me and Ralph to come down to, we got Ralph to come down, then Ralph got me to come down to the Enjoying Life retreat. It's not too far from here, I don't think, is it? Yeah, it's just a stone's throw. And he got us to come down and for the meeting, and they do a meditation each morning, and Sunday before this was, I think, the second time we were there, and Morris led that meditation that Sunday morning, and he read from a book that's written by a man named Henry Drummond, and it's called The Greatest Thing on Earth. And it blows my mind. That's the crazy thing about AA, is that it blows my mind. It never doesn't deliver. Never. And he read this, and it says, I shall pass through this world but once. Any good thing, therefore, that I can do, or any kindness that I can show, Let me do it now. Let me not defer it or neglect it, for I shall not pass this way again. And I knew I had that book at home. So I went home and I got that book out. And the first thing I saw, there was a book, and I acquired it somehow. Like we acquire books in AA. You know, it's like all of a sudden you got books. There's books everywhere. But there was a bookmark in that book, and I didn't put it there, and it was on that page that had that quote. And that's how AA works for me in my life. It's how it works, you know. When I'm awakened through these steps, when I have had a spiritual awakening as the result of these steps, I see things like that. Things show up. The problem is they've been showing up the whole time, right? And I'm just unavailable. I'm unavailable. In the night tradition, it talks a little bit about, and I'm going to paraphrase here. We talked about paraphrasing earlier at breakfast, but I am going to paraphrase because it's not enough smart water, man. I'm, getting up there. Some of these things, because I get ideas in my head and I think through them and in and out of the book. But it talks about in the night tradition, it's like his drunkenness brought on by delusion was not anybody else's problem. It was his direct disobedience to spiritual principles. And that's the story of my life. Because spiritual principles are like gravity, right? Does anybody here not know how gravity works? When you were 5, did you know how gravity worked? No. But you didn't jump off the roof because gravity works every time, just like spiritual principles. I don't have to know about them. I don't have to believe them. I don't have to have anything, but they work. They're constant in this universe. Now I'm going to tell my Walt story. This is a good one, by the way. This is one of my favorite. So I don't know. I was probably 3 years sober or something like that, crazy. I mean, look, man, I'll tell the stories, but, at 3 years sober, I was still like barely holding on to a job, going through a divorce, going through bankruptcy, was fighting to see my kids, all the things that we go through after we hit the scratch off. And I was doing all that, and I was in Tupelo trying to sell hardwood lumber to a non-existent cabinet manufacturing industry because the housing industry had shut completely down. And I was driving around, I was freaking out, and I'm trying to do this thing. I'm trying to get sober. I'm trying to be a cool new boyfriend to my hot girlfriend at the time, and she had way more stuff going on than I did, and I was talking to Walt. I think Walt was kind of halfway sponsoring me. Really what that meant was I was looking for somebody to tell me what I wanted to hear. Walt's not that guy to get that information from. And I was calling him on the phone. I was in Tupelo, and he was trying to tell me how to get to the meeting. And it's the meeting in it used to be in a blue metal building. So I'm driving around, and I'm, steering wheel gripped tight. Man, I'm mad. And Walt's telling me how to get to this meeting. This guy doesn't know where this meeting is. These AA people, man, I was quite sure, even at 3 years, that you guys were joking me, right? That y'all had jokes on me. And Walt was trying to tell me, hey, this is before GPS or any of that, So, and I'm trying to get there, and I'm trying to get there, and I'm trying to get there. And finally, I'm like, you know what? I don't call Walt anymore because he's like, man, whatever. If you can't find it, you can't find it. But I needed to find it. And I pull up to a stop sign. And, man, I just start punching my steering wheel, and the horn goes off. And this person pulls up next to me, and they're like, you all right? I'm like, yeah, I'm fine. And they were like, okay, everything good? I said, yeah, everything's good, man. Everything's good. And the horn stops blowing right about that time, and the guy looks at me and goes, hey, man, looks like your day just got a little bit better. Okay. I'm at the stop sign. I'm like, look, man. And just in my head, I'm like, all right, I'm going to turn left, and I'm out of here. And I turn left, and pretty much I turn into the parking lot of the blue building. I think I drove like maybe a couple hundred yards into the parking lot of the blue building that I had been looking for 45 minutes that I was quite sure Walt was lying to me about. And first person that I saw there was the guy that pulled up next to me that said, looks like your day just got better. The second person I saw there was your dad. And he walked up, shook my hand, introduced himself. He didn't know me from Adam. But that's how God shows up in my life. And it hasn't stopped. That hasn't stopped just because I had a little bit more time, right? That's how God shows up in my life in Alcoholics Anonymous. And it's been happening, I keep a lot of trinkets with me. I carry them with me. They're important to me. I have This is a stone that I found on the ground outside of our house. We were painting a fence, and we managed to paint the fence without getting in a fight. I picked up the stone. I have a pen from a nautical wizard that a friend of mine made, and he makes pens, and we never could really figure out because wizards don't really drive boats. I have a crystal a friend of mine gave me that's got some stuff that goes along with that. I've got my medallion from our graveyard. We used to have a meeting in the graveyard in Memphis, Tennessee, in Germantown, actually. And it was in a graveyard. During COVID, they started it. And we made medallions for that. I have my sponsor. I have a sponsor that has a sponsor that his name is Ralph, and you can call him, and he knows he's my sponsor. And he'll tell you the M stands for money. So I got his money clip. I have my 17-year medallion. I have a cross that came from my in-laws' church, Needs Creek Baptist New Testament Missionary Baptist Church. Am I saying that right? Okay. And then I have my friend's combo wrench, and it's a big deal. It's a really big deal. I love that friend deeply. And I carry those with me, and I carry my rosary with me too. Look, I don't know, man. Like for me, if you don't hear anything I say tonight, I serve a loving Creator. A living Creator, and that Creator loves me, and that Creator, I'm 100% loves you too. So if you don't hear anything else I say, hear that. Supposed to wait until at the end of the stuff to get all worked up, man. But man, I can't help it, right? Man, I'm in. I'm 100% in on Alcoholics Anonymous, and I have been since I got here. It's really the first time I'd ever found a book that I agreed with. Right? I mean, it seems right. Who needs a top, right? Just throw it out. It's good stuff. Where's the new kid? 4 months. Where's our raffle guy? There he is. Hey, man, welcome to Alcoholics Anonymous. It's a big deal. You know, I started in the Bluff City. I remember walking up to this woman that spoke the year before I did at Bluff City in 2008, and I just walked up to the registration table. I said, I need to do something. And she said, come on back here behind this table, honey, and help me do registration. And I started doing registration at Bluff City, our fellowship there for that weekend, and it helped me get involved in Alcoholics Anonymous. And that's how you stay sober. You don't want to be AA adjacent. You know, you don't want to be around AA. You want to be in AA. You want to be sober. That's what happens. People that serve stay sober. That's the whole thing, right? The whole entire philosophy of Alcoholics Anonymous is predicated on service to others, unselfish service to others, and that's how we make it through life. I was born in Orlando, Florida. I do want to start with one thing, and I like to read. Man, the Big Book is my basic text. And it's where if you have a problem, the solution's here. Every time, whether you like it or not, that doesn't matter. This comes from page 28, and it says, "If we have learned and felt and seen means anything at all, it means that all of us, whatever our race, creed, or color, are the children of the living Creator, with whom we may form a relationship upon simple and understandable terms as soon as we are willing and honest enough to try." And that's the truth for my life today. I have a relationship with my living Creator, my loving Creator. That's the truth. That's my truth. But why let the truth stand in the way of a good story, right? So let's go. I was born in Orlando, Florida in 1973. I've heard it say before, it was not necessary for me to take a drink after that, but I did. I was adopted. I don't know. My wife and I have discussed this over and over again, and maybe there was some, especially getting to be with a baby as frequently as we are, and having our own children, and understanding like how important that dynamic is. Like, man, time to a baby is wild, right? Because it's just like that. They go from being conceived to walking in a matter of months, and so I think there's maybe when I was adopted, this is what I've convinced myself, is that maybe somewhere along the line I didn't get picked up enough. Maybe, I don't know. I could be wrong. Who knows? But my parents were great people. I love them both dearly. Have a great relationship with my mother. My father's passed, but I had a good relationship with him. But man, I showed up out of time. Like, I showed up to class. You guys all had the book. I didn't have the book. And I made sure I was a terror. Yeah, it's funny because my story, like everybody else's story, is like, oh, well, my childhood was pretty good. And all of a sudden I grew up and I started drinking and I got wild. Not me. I got boring when I got older. Like, I just stayed at home and drank. That's what I did. When I was younger, fun time. So, I mean, I got in trouble all the time. I mean, from probably third grade, I was the kid in class. And that's why I was talking about, like, spiritual principles. Like, I didn't know that I was being disobedient to spiritual principles when I was 8 years old. But I was disrespectful to my teachers. I was dishonest. I made my parents fearful. I would sneak out the window, would disappear. Third grade, started in resource in fourth grade. By the end of fourth grade, I was in the portable. You guys know where the portable is. Everybody shaking their head. Some of y'all are probably in the portable, so I'm in the right place. That's what I'm saying. When everybody starts shaking your head, you're in the right place. Like, I know where the portable is. I know what that's like. And then eventually it was like almost severe lockdown in the regular school, where it's literally you only come in to get lunch, and then they send you back to where you go. And then fifth grade, they kicked me out of one elementary school and sent me to another elementary school where I was with some handicapped children, primarily, other than me, and they were significantly handicapped compared to myself. And then in middle school, they tried me out in normal school for, maybe 3 or 4 weeks. They were like, this is not working. And they sent me to a profoundly handicapped school. And I went there, and there were people, they would wheel them essentially in beds. And they were but they knew how to behave themselves. I didn't. I had no idea, no clue. I was wild. I was jumping in and out of windows. I was hiding, running around. My parents had to lock me up very early age. I had my first drink probably around 10-ish, 11-ish. It was Jack Daniels and grapefruit juice. I don't recommend it. It's gross. I never drank that again, and I didn't really drink that much right then, right, because I'm locked up. But I tried doing all kinds of stupid stuff, like smoke dry banana peels, snort nutmeg, whatever. And if you would let me out long enough, I'd hit the Freon on the air conditioner. I was crazy. I was wild. I'd run wild. It was wild. Some people haven't heard my story yet. They're real close to me, and they're like, "Are you sure?" Yeah, I'm sure. I was a terror. My mom called me a terrorist. She was right. I was a terrorist, man. I was a terrorist. And I don't know why. My parents were pretty normal. Man, I got divorced. Hell, everybody gets divorced, right? What else are you doing anymore? No, I'm just kidding. You shouldn't get divorced. Don't get divorced if you don't. Don't say anything the AA speaker said get divorced, because that's not true. But they got divorced. I was in a wilderness camp. We were talking about wilderness camps earlier today. I was in a wilderness camp when they got divorced. And, of course, I didn't care. I mean, I was locked up and locked away. They were like, your parents got divorced. How do you feel? I'm like, I've been here for 10 months, man. Like, what do you, like, I don't really care. It's just the way my life was. And, I've thought about it in Alcoholics Anonymous in my life since I got sober. And it's like, I never had any hope. I didn't care. I just thought about being locked up. And there were times when I was locked up. And I would go into the lockup, and I would misbehave in the lockup. And then they lock me up in the lockup. And they leave me there. I was like, I'd seen 48 Hours at that point in my life, because you could watch movies in juvie. You could watch movies, all kinds of stuff. It's 48 Hours. So they'd stick me way back in the back of the juvie center, and I'd sit back there and sing, Roxanne, you don't have to put on the red light. And they'd say, shut up. No. Bang on the doors, It's wild. It's wild, I was disobedient to spiritual principles. That was the entire problem of my life, 100%. Obviously, I moved to Memphis. I get out, wreck my mom's car immediately upon getting out. My mom sends me a Bible and says, go to your dad's, and my dad says, hey, we're moving to Memphis. So we moved to Memphis. I drive up through Alabama. I moved to Memphis, and when I got to Memphis, I had a black mohawk, and it was 1987, shaved down the side, black mohawk. I was a skater kid, that's what I did, and that's not what they did in Memphis. When I got to Memphis, everybody was dressed in like Sebagos and duck head pants and white button-down shirts, and at my high school, and I show up and they're like, "Who's this guy?" I didn't last very long. They locked me. They kicked me out of Memphis City schools. I didn't even make it through the whole year. I was living in my grandparents' house, and at this point, I had really started like hanging out with some older cats and that were drinking, and we were drinking a lot of booze, a lot of beer, a lot of Meisterbräu. That's what they liked to drink, and I didn't really care. I didn't know any better. I just drank whatever they drank, and we drank, and they'd fight. And I had a friend of mine, this kid, he's a grown-up man now. I see him every now and then, Alex M. And he and I, man, he was younger than me. He was still in elementary school, and we were sitting there in these old people's houses. Not old, they're not like Morris or anything, but they were, they were, older than we were. But that wasn't hard to do when you're 14 and 11. Anybody's older than you were. But and man, that we would just drink, and do other things too. My wife talked about it too. Drugs are a part of my story. I think it's commonplace in AA, but I given a sufficient reason, stop or moderate, and I, haven't found it necessary to do that. But my grandmother, she was a lovely lady. She did not like me. I was unlikable. You guys find that hard to believe. I was very unlikable. Because I terrorized their house. And eventually my grandfather told me he kicked me out. I think I was 15, maybe a little 16 or something like that, 15, 16. He kicked me out for stealing stamps because he believed I had stolen some stamps from him and that I was fencing stamps. And I still don't know anything about stamps. But he had collections of stamps, and he was missing some. So they kicked me out, and they moved me into hotels. And this is, in Memphis, this one lands pretty good, but they used to have one of the first hotels I stayed in was called the Royal Oaks. And that was the first Holiday Inn ever, anywhere. It was on Summer Avenue. It was not the Holiday Inn when I moved in there, but it was a Holiday Inn at one point. And I moved around different hotels. So I'm 15 years old. I'm living in a hotel. I've got a bathtub full of beer and ice. And I got all my buddies coming over to party, and everybody, and it's every night, doesn't matter, Monday through Monday. We're coming over to party. We're going to Bill's hotel. We're going to party, and we drink, do other things, lots of psychedelics and stuff like that. And the thing is those kids would all leave and go home to their parents, their houses. Now they might get in a little trouble, yelled at. Hell, some of them are probably in AA here or there. I don't know. I haven't seen any of them, but they go home, and I wouldn't. And at some point in time, and I moved around from hotels. I would go to because it was weird, right? Because your dad's coming in to pay for the hotel room. They're like, how come the kid's living in the hotel? And anyway, so I'd have to move. And we'd go to Admiral Benbow, and we'd go to the Motel 6. Motel 6 is still there. I took my wife by there, not too long ago, but it's still there. And move around. And it was the same story, drink or whatever. And eventually I came to my dad and I said, hey, man, something's not right. I need to go to treatment. I need to do something. Something's not right. And that's like, for me, when I think about that, I think about that from the perspective of Bill's story when he talks about the warning on the doggerel at the Winchester Cathedral that, and he talks about it coming back up. And I also like to look at that from the perspective of, and how it works. It says we stood at the turning point. And I like to think about, how many times did I stand at the turning point? And any time that I'm faced with something, I'm always at the turning point. And the instruction that Alcoholics Anonymous gives me is that we stood at the turning point. We asked his care with complete care, with abandon. And I never did that. I always stood at the turning point. And I always continued to blot out the intolerable circumstances of my life. But I didn't know, right? Because I'm disobedient to spiritual principles, and I don't know any better. I don't know this. But they work. I promise. They're working right now. Whether you believe in them, whether you know it, it doesn't matter. They're at work currently. So he sent me to St. Francis. Man, Al-Anon, Emma, great talk. Great talk. My dad was an Al-Anon. He was a great Al-Anon. And we don't get here without Al-Anons. So thank you. And my dad, he co-signed every single thing that I did. He took me to treatment, and they would let me out on the weekends, and he would take me, put me up in a hotel on the weekend. And guess what? Well, he's got to get some Meisterbrow. Guys got to come over. Bill's out. But, I got to go back to treatment, and they might drug test me, so I got to drink all this pickle juice and, vinegar with egg whites in it or whatever anybody that we could concoct over the weekend to think about me drinking to pass a drug test, right? They never drug tested me. They didn't care. And, I eventually leave the treatment center. And, that's probably, I would say my first exposure to Alcoholics Anonymous was through Alateen. And I thought that was babysitting for AA, right? Because that was my mom would go to AA, and she would go sit over here in the church, and it'd be kids, and I'm like, what am I doing here? These kids aren't cool, So I started singing "Jesus Loves Me" or something. They would have been right. That was my first experience with it, and then of course in the treatment center they would bring us out to meetings, and they would bring meetings in, and I didn't really know any better or anything, but I did get out of there after 28 days. Turns out 28 days is a magic number. They even made a movie about it. Kid's good. Take me home. What else do I do? I'm an alcoholic. I'm a heavy drug user at this point, and terrorizing my dad now, and I'm not going to school, and I'm not doing what I'm supposed to do. When I am in school, chances are I'm eating a lot of LSD before I went to school, or drank some Robitussin, or whatever, drink some beers, or we'd have hot beers outside hidden. We did something. We weren't going to school unaltered, and school decided they didn't like me, mostly because I was unlikable. The second part was because I had gotten arrested for using my dad's house as a place to sell drugs from, and luckily for my dad, they were willing to incarcerate me for a little bit longer than 28 days, and he got a break for about 18 months, for the most part, which is kind of crazy. So I jump around here. I go get locked up. I tell them, hey, man, I need some help. They send me back to the same treatment center, St. Francis. Send me back there. St. Francis go, what are you doing here, man? I don't know. The juvenile court sent me here. They're like, hey, yeah, well, you're good. You can go home on the weekends. Everything's fine. Just hang out. So it's back to the same thing, right? I'm doing the same thing. Dad picks me up, takes me to the hotel, get the beer, blah, 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 go back to the treatment. I go back and forth there. I'm waiting on a bed at a place called Memphis Recovery Centers now. It was called Memphis House at the time. And I eventually get there. And they want to help me. These people want to help me. They're very AA based. They're very 12-step based. They wanted to help me. They wanted to help me get sober. Help me. I don't know about get sober. They wanted to help straighten my life out. But they were AA based, and of course we went to treatment centers and stuff, or we went out to outside meetings, all that kind of stuff. And they had some inside therapies that they used that were ineffective on me, because I had been through it all, man. I mean, I had been locked out in the wilderness I was in a wilderness camp for 18 months. Man, there wasn't anything you were going to do to me from a therapy-wise that I hadn't heard, seen, been a part of. It just wasn't working. So they were like, can't stay here. Sent me back down to juvie. Juvie sent me a couple other places, went into a more secure facility. And that was a good thing for me, because I got my GED there. I probably would have never got that if I wouldn't have got locked up. So that was probably a bonus there. Got out. My dad's like, hey, you got your GED? Now it's like high school diploma. I'm like, yeah, I'm so good at school. It's like, well, you should go to college. I'm like, yeah, that's a great idea. So I go down to State Tech. It's been other things now. It's Southwest Community College now. I go down to State Tech with some cash in my pocket. And this is when you used to have to go to school, and you had to register at school, and like bring cash to the bursar's office and like pay your tuition and all that. And it's not a good, just doesn't story. It ends really good for me at the time, but maybe not so much for my dad. He'd given me like $600, and my buddies were in line, and we're like, "Hey, what are you doing this weekend?" "Oh man, we're going to see the Grateful Dead in Ohio." I said, "Sounds like a good idea." And I did that. That was 1991, and then I went and did Dead Tour for 3 or 4 years after that. Look, man, if you want to get loaded, there's no better place to do it. It's wide open, and I had a blast. I would love to sit here and say it was bad, but man, I was free. I was unhoused, transient in nature. Had hotels sometimes not, But I was introduced, we drank all the time. There was never a time we weren't drinking or doing something. But I had an experience in California. I lived out there for a couple of years. And we had some friends, and we got into some really hard drugs. We had a friend of ours that died in front of us of a heroin overdose. And I was involved in that. That was a part of my life. I was an intravenous drug user at that time. And I was, again, I stood at the turning point. What am I going to do? I call my dad. Man, I got to get out of here. He sends me a bus ticket. It was a long bus ride home. I was sick. Took a bus ride. This is in 1993. Got back to Memphis, kind of similar to my wife. Never did heroin again. Got back home. Nobody knows. I don't even ask for it. I don't know where it is. First thing I did when I get off the bus, though, meet my friends. Get a bottle of Jägermeister. I woke up on some lady's couch with 2 kids watching Barney. I was like, man, I don't know how this happened. I was on a bus from California, and I get off the bus from California and get drunk the first night, and I wake up on some lady's couch I'd never met before in my life, and with two young kids watching Barney. And I was like, man, where am I? Anyways, it's normal stuff like that. Got in the bar restaurant industry, great industry if you want to drink all the time and do other things. It's a wonderful place to work. You can also be sober and work those places too. It's wild. You can be sober. You can do everything you can do drunk. You can do it sober. Just to tell you all that. If you didn't already know. But that's the fun part, right? That's like the fun. Now it's the boring part. I met first ex-wife number 1, had a kid, didn't fix me. Her and I are both, we don't like to diagnose anybody, but she has certainly been in and out of the rooms at times, and she has, grown up and matured in a way that she can live her life the way she lives it. And my grown son, he's 30. I have a 30-year-old and a 21-year-old, which is kind of wild to think about. Both of them talk to me, which is even more wild. But I just drank through that marriage. Both of us did. And eventually we got divorced, of course, because that's what happens. And I think we were married longer than we lived together. And then I proceeded to continue to drink. And, the way at that point, like when I was getting out of that marriage and I was hanging out with my buddies again, like I would go out to the bars and drink and all night long and party and end up in the late night clubs. I say late night clubs. We have some... I don't know what you guys call them here. I just call them late night clubs. We have a place called Alex's, and it stays open 24 hours a day. And after 3 o'clock in the morning, you go in there and they just give you the solo cup, and you just walk around and pretend like you're not drinking. And that's where we all went and drank, was Alex's. And Rhodes College kids go over there and drink. And that's what we did. We drank. And I met second wife, number 2, generally in that general time period. And, that was the thing, man. It's like, man, I pretty much settled down at that point. I pretty much just chilled out. I stayed home. I was quite sure that I didn't need to, I wanted, it's funny. There's something, and I've heard it this weekend, huge. I heard it with Shirley. I heard it with my wife. And one of the first things in Bill's story that talks about is that we'll see all domesticated situations work out, feuds of all kinds be settled. And I thought what that meant when I got sober was that, like, all right, I'm going to get another shot at this thing. But I didn't know that it was going to be the shot that I'm in now. I thought it was going to be like, okay, so I'm going to get better and all the things are going to be forgiven and we're going to get back to the normal. And that never panned back out. And it was because it wasn't supposed to. But what has happened as a result of Alcoholics Anonymous is that I've become somebody that can be a husband, a friend, dependable, loving, kind-ish, most of the time. It's maybe a stretch. This is my story now. You heard the other story earlier. I'm great. But that's my truth. And I heard that. I didn't see. I think Shirley May. Is Shirley still here? You here, Shirley? No. She had a grandbaby running around here. And what I heard her talk about was her children when they moved here and her ability to take care of those kids, and where she couldn't do that in California. And Alcoholics Anonymous gave her that opportunity to have that, to be a good mom, to show up in their lives. And she described one in the Marines, one in college, one studying to be a nurse, one working and doing some other job. That's what this is about. That's what happens. And so, like, we read this book and we hear these words, and at some points in time they mean certain things, but what we really figure out later on is they mean something totally different. They mean something totally different, because later the promises say our attitude and outlook upon life will change, which means that my attitude and outlook upon having all domestic feuds and all situations righted, it changed because I changed, because I became somebody who could be a husband that was a good husband and that would show up and that was there and loved his wife and cared about her. My number one job, the book tells me where I'm supposed to take. I am the leader of my home. Spiritually, period. That's my job. And the book's real clear about that. It says I take my spiritual principles in 3 places: my home, my job, my affairs. You guys are my affairs. So easy to stand up here and talk about this stuff. It's so simple for me to say here and be a good guy. But when I go home, can I be a good guy? When I'm vulnerable at home, that's where I'm the most vulnerable. I'm not vulnerable with any of you because I love you guys, primary purpose, all that stuff. But guess what? She raises her eyebrow the wrong way. Boy, I can go, what did I do? Oh my God, I got to figure it out, man. Because that's why we have to take those principles home first. That's the first place we take them. Second marriage, divorce. That leads up into the getting sober part. And really, man, I've been sober longer than I didn't start drinking out really alcoholically till I was doing the California thing. I guess, you could call anything not right. When you're consuming as much as you can all the time, that's probably not a good thing, right? But if I review it and I think like, okay, when did I cross over from being alcoholic, not being alcoholic? I think I always have been. I've always been spiritually separated, which is the problem of being a human. I've always suffered my human problem, and that's separating from my Creator. But the end of that looked like I had to come apart, and we had business collapsed. It was housing industry 2008, everything, or 2007, total collapse. And I blame it on that, but really, I was a drunk. I was not a good husband. I was at home. You could count on me to come home, but I was drunk. I was unavailable on a personal level. Certainly incapable of loving another person in any way, shape, or form at all. Certainly capable of withholding love. Certainly capable of that. And I'm still capable of that today. I am capable of going up and getting prayed up and coming home and coming downstairs and just pulling the pin and lobbing the grenade over the couch. I can do that just as good as I can come down and kiss my wife on the forehead. I'm still capable of all those things. And it's not to say that it doesn't happen. But my intent is to serve primarily her. It's wild. So I get the end of this, on my way into AA, my mom calls the police department in the little town I lived in at the time, Bartlett, and it's wild because all my arrests have happened in Bartlett when I was a kid and when I was an adult. They all happened there. And my mom did a well check because I was not well. I needed a well check. Bartlett Police Department showed up at my house, and I said, we're here to do a well check. I said, what's that? I said, we need to make sure you're all right. I said, I'm all right. I said, we need you to come out of the house. I said, I know my rights. And I said, well, you do just fine. And they showed me my rights, right to the car. That's what they did. I call it three-man kung fu, And they showed me right to the car, and in front of my son too, which was wild. And so I had a friend of mine come over and get him. She came over and got him. She actually got sober later on, but she was standing in the garage when they were hauling me out of my home. It was the best thing that ever happened to me. It was really the best thing that ever happened to me, and it saved my life. It gave me a life worth living. And I really would prefer, like, when I talk about, my wife tells me, because I'm like, man, I'd really rather talk about Alcoholics Anonymous and the steps and the book. And she said, they're telling you, you're supposed to tell your story. But yeah, I know. But I like to talk about the book, I like to talk about the solution. So I go to jail. I get out. The first thing I do is drink when I get out of jail, because that's what we do. We're alcoholic. I didn't really think about even being alcoholic or not being alcoholic or any of that kind of stuff. And I was working for a guy at the time in the housing industry, and he's like, hey, man, everything's going to be fine. Don't worry about it. We got you. He put me up in a model home. He said, you can live here, but you got to make sure nobody can tell you're living here. Like, okay, got it. And he said, don't worry, everything's going to be all right. I was a superintendent for him. That's what I was doing. He was building spec homes. And just like every other time, man, the door shut behind me, and he was gone, and I was there. And I don't know about you guys, but me with myself, by myself, it's not a good place, man, And this was on my 35th birthday, I think, something like that. Yeah, it's 35th birthday. My date of my last drink was June 27th. I celebrate July 1st because I didn't really know. I mean, I was messed up really bad, and like mentally, emotionally, spiritually, really more than anything. And he left, and I left shortly after that, and then got in my truck and went down to the river, and I ran a hose from my tailpipe through my CPAP mask, put it on my face, and I start my truck, it would start running, somebody would pull up, I'm like, oh, turn it off, get done. I got to do this, right? This can't be stopped. And for one reason or another, and I know what that reason was because God had something else for me to do, I was unsuccessful. And that was the night I went to another fellowship because I had been to AA meetings in the 80s, and everybody looked like Morris. And they said things like, oh, yeah, we spilt more liquor on our tie than you ever drank, kid, But we loved those places, right, because we could go in and smoke, right? While the van monitor was outside, we could go and steal cigarettes and drink coffee. And anyways, so I went to another fellowship, and I remember going in that first meeting, where I went to, the church I went to, Grimes Methodist, is now Chick-fil-A. And And I remember going in there, man, I was snot slinging, crying. I was absolutely like drenched, and the only thing I heard, a guy walked up to me, put his hand on my shoulder. He said, just go to another meeting. And that's what I did. I went to another meeting that night called Dopeless Hope Fiends. And, it was wild. It was a good one too, man. And it was in Midtown, Cooper and Walker, Memphis, and I pulled up, and there's people. You always know where the meeting is because people are outside smoking. There's people outside smoking, and there's people outside smoking crack, and everybody goes in the meeting. The crack smokers and the cigarette smokers all go into the meeting. So we're in there in this NA meeting in the basement, and I'm back to snot slinging and crying and doing all those things, but man, I knew I was comfortable. I knew where I needed to be. I don't know how I did. I couldn't explain that to you, but that's just where the power of God shows up, in my life. And that's where the recovery journey started for me, was in those meetings. And I went to, some of those, and then eventually I went to one that didn't make. They weren't very consistent at the time. And a friend of mine said, hey man, you need to go to the Tower. And I'd been at the Tower before, so, I knew where the Tower was. Can tell me anything. Still, Ralph will say it, it's like we're the only people that can lay in the gutter and look down at somebody else at the same time. It's like, you can't tell me where the tower is. So I go to the tower, and I call him. I was like, you're lying to me. This tower's not here. Because it used to be in the tower, Clark Tower. And it was over at Schnucks, behind Schnucks. Walt knows what I'm talking about. People from Memphis do. And I make it over there. That's where I bought this book. I've had this book since sometime in July of 2008 because I have court dates and food stamp numbers and meeting topics and all kinds of stuff. Like here, read big books, shut up and listen. Yeah, first and foremost, not under any circumstances, drink right now. Cornerstone 56:47, Keystone 62, Cement 17. Those are the things I was learning in Alcoholics Anonymous. In 2008, well, not in 2008, but that's what's written in this book. But craziest thing, man, I loved AA. I was living in my truck, going to Came to Believe, going to Memphis Center. These are all meetings in Memphis. I was making 7 meetings a day. And then, because I couldn't go home. The judge said, don't go home. You can't go back to your house. You got to leave. Don't call your wife. I was getting, Shelby County Sheriff's Department knew me some way, shape, or form because I would get pulled over randomly and they would hand me another restraining order. It got so bad that we had to go to restraining order court. And the judge told my ex-wife's family, said, he understands. We don't need any more. He's not going to bother you. And eventually they let me go back to my house. And I walked in my house and I looked around and I saw what I had done to my home. And I'd seen the pictures and all the things that I'd done and torn up my house. And I was like, wow. And my son, my oldest son, was gone to Florida with my mom because I couldn't talk to him either. And he was good. It had been arranged. He was coming back to start school again, and I couldn't face that. So I ate a bottle of ibuprofen PM and prepared to go ahead and check out again. And I was 60 days sober at that point. No drinks, no drugs, no nothing. Stone cold sober. It talks about it in the book. It says he will wish for the end. He'll be at the jumping off place. Cannot imagine life with or without it. Cannot imagine life. That's where I was at. And I woke up. I don't know how long I was asleep, Apparently, PM ibuprofen puts you to sleep. I woke up, but I woke up. I'm making fun. It's funny in hindsight, but if you've ever found yourself in that position where that is an option, it's real, And I'm grateful it didn't work because I wouldn't have the life. I wouldn't be standing here with you guys. I wouldn't have the life that I have today. I would have short-sold myself a long time ago. I called my sponsor and I told him what happened. He said, man, it might be a good idea for us to try these steps. And he started taking me through the steps. My first sponsor kind of worked in both fellowships, and he had a lot of experience with the big book. And I got a lot of exposure to that to the literature. Then went through my first, went through my steps pretty quickly because I was very interested in a particular person that had significantly more sobriety than I did, and had significantly more experience in the literature than I did. So I had to learn fast to talk right. And I did. She talked about that earlier, right? She said, hey, man, God's going to use our character defects to serve him, That's why in the 7th step it says, take away my defects as they stand in my way of being useful to others. And I don't know what those defects are. Right? And if I would have wished any one of those defects away at any point in time, man, my usefulness is diminished, So God used those defects, got me in this literature, got me in the big book, did some Joe Hawk work. I don't know if you guys ever heard of Joe Hawk. Went through some big book awakenings with my sponsor now and some other friends of mine. But I remember that first, this is after I'd gone through my first round through the steps with my sponsor. And I remember my first 4th step, I didn't really, in hindsight, man, I came in on the second part of the first step. My life was unmanageable. It was obvious. I just explained it to you. It's totally unmanageable. I didn't understand the first part of the first step. I understood the unmanageability because I was living in my truck. I couldn't go home. And, even when I was unemployable, even after the ibuprofen PM thing, didn't have a job, had like 9 jobs, boom, 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 rapid succession, unmanageable life, bankruptcy, divorce, social services. I had to go like for a year through social services to be able to see my younger son again. Unmanageable, totally got it. Never really focused on the first part of the first step. Hey, baby. She's so sweet. We love her so much. We're so blessed to have that little baby in our life and those kids that have her, you know. How amazing is that? Yeah, unmanageability. It's crazy when my life is manageable. Blows my mind. I didn't really have that experience with the first part of the first step. It was about 5 years before, and I went through the steps with Ralph. And I really had a significant experience with the first part of the first step. So there's 2 concepts. There's 2 ideas there, right? There's the physical component to alcoholism, and there's the mental obsession to alcoholism. And, you know, we started talking about the physical side of it. I could really get that, right? Because when I start drinking, I'm the shirt comes off, Jerry Lawler guy, strap comes down, woo, you know, and wild, crazy, you know, party time. I can get on, you know, on barbecue team, fun times, you know, all that stuff, you know. When I'm drinking, I can have a good time. But I don't know how much I'm going to take, and I don't really care. I don't have a regulator. I just drink until I'm not standing anymore, until I can't drink anymore. So I got that first part, like it talks on page 44. If when I start, I can't control the amount I take. I understood that. I didn't necessarily understand the obsession part. Now, I talked to my sponsor about that. One time I was at a Tigers game. I'd heard some guys talking about going to, they were going to go tailgate, and they were at the Tower. They were going to go tailgate at the game. I think it was like Mickey Keep and Rex and some of those cats, and they were going to go and they were going to tailgate. And I was like, I'm going to go tailgate too, because I figured what I would do is just wander up, you know, and be like, hey guys, you know, because I didn't know anybody. I couldn't do anything. And I was standing there watching people just bring cases of beer and kegs of beer in their little wagons to their little tailgate spots. And I was talking to my sponsor on the phone. I was like, man, these people all have beer. And it's got crazy, man, they got, you know, suitcases of beer on their shoulders. They're coming. And he said, yeah, man, you know what? Nobody else sees that. They're just going to a football game. You're the only one that's counting how many beers are on their shoulders, you know. That's the obsession. And I was like, whatever. You know, but then in talking with Ralph about it a couple years later, I understood that a little bit better. And what I came to believe and came to understand was that when I was in home building, and me and Garrison were talking about this earlier, and man, my whole focus of the world was getting to Buffalo Wild Wings at 2 o'clock. 2 o'clock. My eyes open in the morning, Buffalo Wild Wings at 2 o'clock. Olive Branch, still there. Had to be there, you know, because that's where we were going to drink. We were going to get loaded before we go back to the shop and get all our jobs scheduled and everything. And I thought I would tell you, man, I was a great employee. I was a great salesman. And I did everything I needed to do to get to Buffalo Wild Wings at 2 o'clock in the afternoon. And it occurred to me when I was talking to Ralph, I was like, that's the obsession. So I thought that I was deciding to do all these good things so that I wouldn't be interrupted to get to Buffalo Wild Wings by 2 o'clock. But alcohol was telling me, you will behave in this manner because you must be here at this time, and nothing can stand in your way. You know? Nothing can stand in your way. Anybody here ever decide to, say if someone said, man, you just need to stop drinking for a month. You're like, I can do it. Stop drinking for a month. And then on the 30th day, it's like, all right, I'm going to get my, you know, whatever, 31st day or the first day of the next month, I'm going to get a 12-pack. Well, why don't you just stay? Why don't you mind your own business? You know, don't stand in my way, right? Because I told you I would do this, or whatever that looks like, right? And that 2 o'clock, if you would have gotten in my way to get to 2 o'clock, that was a problem for me, and a problem for you, more than likely. And I understood the obsession, you know. I understood the obsession. And then I started to understand the unmanageability side of it differently. And the unmanageability side for me was it talks about on page 51, it says leaving aside the drink question. So leaving aside the physical craving for alcohol, the obsession of the mind for alcohol, They tell why life was so unsatisfactory, you know. And it talks about having the emotional natures, and page 52, what we call the bedevilments and all that. And that's the spiritual malady. And until I straighten that out, the other two don't straighten out. And the steps serve to do that. That's what the steps do. They straighten out the spiritual malady, straighten out that second part of the first step. And there's some things I've been thinking about lately, like, right, the big book defines insanity as the inability to think straight. Now, it talks about it as the first drink, but, you know, once you're sober and you're recovered, you know, we still suffer the insanity of the inability to think straight. The second step says, came to believe that a power greater than myself could restore me to sanity. Well, the working definition in the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous for insanity is the ability to think straight, you know. And I didn't know that at the time. This is something that I've just kind of been thinking about here recently. When I think about, like, the way our literature works and the places in it that points back and forth to that, right? And I have the ability to think proportionally straight, especially where drinking is concerned. Actually, I don't even really think about drinking. It never occurs to me. I just don't, you know. My life's been recreated. The doctor's opinion, it says, if his ideas are grounded in a power greater than themselves, his life can be recreated. And I think that's a promise to me. And my life has been absolutely recreated in so many ways. I get the privilege. This is such a privilege to stand here to share time with you guys, because you guys could be anywhere else when you're here. You know, you could be doing anything else tonight, and you're sharing my time, and I'm sharing your time. And I'm really grateful for that. You know, I talked about serving my wife, and I serve my family, and it's so important to me to do that. It's the first thing I do when I get up in the morning. When I take guys through the steps, what I say to them is like, hey, we're going to talk about 84 through 88. My friend John L. back in Memphis, he says, my sponsor say you could whatever step got a 1 in front of it. And I agree with John, you know, because it's true, right? Because I can work the first step, and then those last 3 steps that have a 1 in front of them are the reassurance that I'm working step 1, right? And that 84 is so important. And for me, when I look at that and the way I understand it to work, or at least the way I read it, is like my day starts on page 85. My day starts on page 85. It says, each day is a day must carry the vision for God's will into my activities. How can I best serve thee? That is the proper use of the will. Well, how do I start each day? On awakening. So on page 86, on awakening. And that's what I do every day. And guys I sponsor, you know, they'll call, you know, you're talking to somebody like, hey, what do you do in the morning? Well, you know, I get up and I got to get my coffee, brush my teeth, blah, blah, blah. You know, it's like, do you not follow the directions in the book? Well, you know, yeah, I get to work. I turn the thing down. I sit. No, man, that's not what it says. It says on awakening. So I was working in the refining business for a while. I got into the downstream petrochemical industry. Weirdly enough, I found my way in there, and I worked my butt off, and I was in AA. I was serving in AA. I was a intergroup rep. I was a steering committee member. I was on the treatment center committee. I was sponsoring guys. AA was the central fact of my life. It's the central fact of my life was Alcoholics Anonymous. In about 10 years, I was like, thanks for the information. It's like Jim and Fred. I was like, I'm good. I'm not supposed to live my life in AA with you guys. I've got the solution. You know, I'm good. I'm golden. And I dipped out for about 3 years, 2.5 years. My wife, luckily enough, was working at the intergroup at the time. And so I was still in tune somewhat. She was participating in AA like a normal AA person does. And I was not, and I wasn't drinking, but I was working all the time, and I'd made up these reasons why it was okay for me not to go to AA anymore, and, you know, they don't need me in AA. People would call me, and I would say, I don't do AA. You need to call somebody that does AA. Everything in the book is true. I believe everything it says, but I don't do AA, and you need to call somebody that does. So I felt like I was being honest. I don't see anything wrong with that. Weirdly, the way God shows up, and I kind of gave you some couple of pretty good examples to start the talk, But a couple of years go by, and I had been at this one place for a long time. Well, most of my sobriety, I started there in 2010, and I left in 2021 because we didn't re-sign a contract, and they didn't need a real high-paid general manager to go over to the other new contract. So they were like, "See you later, buddy." And my wife started talking to people that were coming to the office that I was friendly with. Ralph being one of them. Another friend of mine, we call him Cemetery Larry. Or Don Lunati. He's got all kinds of names. Pope of Germantown. You just name it. He's got them. We just give them to him. But I like Cemetery Larry. Gina gave him that name. And but then my friend Doug showed up. And, Ralph had sponsored me up to this point for a bunch of years, and she had been talking to Ralph, but I just wasn't hearing it from Ralph for some reason. And I was traveling a lot at that time because I was having to go. The company I was working for was keeping me on because they thought maybe we might get some work back or whatever. So I was traveling different places. I was coming home from Louisville, and my friend Doug Crail, that's where I get the combo wrench, right? Okay, it's 3/4 inch and 5/8 combo wrench. If anybody needs one, I got it, just in case. And I was riding home one night. I was coming back from Louisville, Kentucky. This man stayed on the phone with me for 6 hours and talked. And one of the first things we were talking about, he was like, "Hey man, you got a plan?" I was like, "What are you talking about?" It's like, "Well, look, you're in AA for 10 years. Plan was working, and then you didn't come to AA anymore, and you didn't drink. So what's your plan?" And he look, people that know Doug, most of you guys don't know Doug, but if Doug asks you a question, Doug already has the answer to the question, or his answer, right? Whatever that might be. And he was sure I didn't have a plan. He was right. I didn't have a plan. I had no plan at all, And he said, "Well, but what he wanted to know, if I did have a plan, that I would share the plan with him, and then he might try my plan." I didn't have a plan. The only plan I had was I don't know. And I wasn't even thinking. He's like, "Man, why don't you come back? It's like, what does it hurt?" And this is when we were doing Zoom meetings, I was like, Zoom meetings? How can I come back to Zoom meetings? And I came back to Zoom meetings. But this is another way that God shows up. "Hey, baby." Talking to Doug, started kind of coming back a little bit, doing some Zoom meetings as I was traveling. And I was working down in St. Gabriel, Louisiana, cleaning up. We did some chemical cleaning, and I was separating chemicals because you can't have them combined. And had been working in this warehouse for like a month, and I'd been going in and out of this office cabinet during this time, and getting supplies like markers and sticky notes and stuff taped to put on pallets and say this should go here, this should go here. It has to have 5 feet between it because it's off-gassing, and you can't have this because it'll cause an explosion. And so I had the notes and all that, and I'd been going back and forth in there, and I'd gone in there this last time to get some air duster because we had this piece of equipment that had eyes on it that got dusty, and we had to clean the eyes off. And I'd gone in this cabinet, and I had been going in and out of this cabinet every day, pretty much for the month that I was there. And I go in and out. I go in this cabinet this time, and I walk in. I open the cabinet door, and all I see is this. I see the corner of a blue book just sticking on the shelf. It's just like sticking off, just that much. And I knew exactly what it was. There was no, and I just pushed it back in, and I and what happened was it sounds crazy when I say it, but I really received a message, I believe, from God. Like, "Hey man, you have a gift. Don't squander this gift. You need to go back and you need to talk about Alcoholics Anonymous, and you need to. You're a teacher, and you're a leader, and I need you to be where I need you to be." And that was the plan, and that was always the plan, because God is everything, right? It's never not been the plan. And that's what I did. And, and Doug was my sponsor up until the time he passed. and he was one of my favorite people that I ever met, and got to spend time with, and I'm certainly grateful for that. I promise I was trying to talk for 79 minutes and 59 seconds, but I don't think I'm going to do that. Really? I only got 8 minutes, and then I'm 79, 59. What do y'all say? I can drag it out 70. I got 8 minutes. Trust me. Rarely have we seen a person fail who has thoroughly followed our path. Well, I mean, so interesting. If you've decided you want what we have, like how can you decide if you want what we have if you don't know what we have, right? I ask guys that all the time when I'm sponsoring them. It's like, hey, write down what it is you think that we have that you want. And when we get to that part, I ask them, I said, what is it? Well, I want world peace. All right, great. That's super. Are you willing to go to have you decided that's what you want? Yes, I've decided that's what I want, Bill. Okay, so you're willing to go to any length to get it? Yes, I'm willing to go to any length to get it. Well, now I'm ready to take certain steps. I'm not ready to take certain steps before that. I'm ready to take certain steps after that. I love that part. I think we that we miss that a lot, that we just go through and that we don't address like what it is that we want and have you decide, because it's going to come back later. It's going to say later in the 8 steps, say, remember, you said you're willing. See, Bill gets you coming and going, right? See, on the front end and on the back end, he says, remember, you agreed that you were willing to go to any length for victory over alcohol, not remission, not maybe someday I'll get drunk again, but absolute victory over alcohol. My wife points it out to people all the time. In the big book, it says, for good and all. To stop drinking for good and all. I'm a big fan of God is everything. Huge fan of that. Those are the absolutes, right? For me, it's an absolute. And you can go at it either way. You can go from the everything or you can go from the nothing, but they're both absolute. They both include one another, because in everything is nothing, and in nothing is everything. I love this book. I could sit up here and talk about it all night, but I am not going to meet it. I'm going to leave this one up to Garrison. Garrison, you're the man. 79-59 for you on Sunday morning. But I will leave you guys with one thing real quick, because I love, man, there's so many things. Whenever we were talking about this morning, anytime you make a talk, there's always the talk before the talk and then the talk after. And I always like to start and end with something from the Big Book of Alcoholics Anonymous. And this is, I want to leave you with this. Page 89. Life will take on new meaning. To watch people recover, to see them help others, to watch loneliness vanish, to see a fellowship grow up about you, to have a host of friends. This is an experience you must not miss. We know you will not want to miss it. Frequent contact with newcomers and with each other is the bright spot of our lives. Thank you. It's been an honor to come and talk with y'all this evening. Thank you for your time.